In the 1960s, the Navy began developing the idea of enlisting dolphins.
The military was certainly curious about how it is they swim so fast through the water, how they manage to find their way, find their fish using sonar, and in an attempt to understand the biology and the acoustic capabilities of these animals, the military did study them from the 1950s through the 60s.
Dolphins are capable of diving more than 600 feet and can remain underwater for at least 20 minutes before surfacing to breathe.
The next step that was taken was actually to start to figure out if we could maybe change these animals from an animal who was studied to an animal who could work for us, and by using operant conditioning training techniques.
In 1965, the Navy's Sea Lab project officially began by conducting tests with a dolphin named Tuffy. Tuffy was trained to deliver messages and instruments to a dive team stationed at the depth of 200 feet. The Navy proved that the dolphin was better than their best frogmen, and rough water conditions wouldn't be a problem for the marine mammal. From this point on, dozens of dolphins were recruited by Uncle Sam.
Dolphins would become, in the minds of many, I'm sure, the perfect weapon.
And it wasn't just the USA training dolphins for war games. Sebastopol is the main port of the powerful Soviet Black Sea Navy. The Russians captured, tested, and trained dolphins beginning in the 50s. Their programs and experiments were mostly identical to those of the Americans.
Believe me, military secrets exist in all countries. The United States too. Any country, capitalist or ex-socialist. They're necessary. We had secrets too.
The Soviets began to specialize in the acoustics and the language of dolphins, and they conducted an astonishing experiment. One dolphin, Alpha, was taught a behavior and then equipped with a microphone. A telephone line was linked to another spot 500 miles away, where a second dolphin, Beta, had been installed, also with a microphone. Beta needed to perform the same exercise, so he questioned Alpha via telephone and obtained the solution. The Russian dolphins also achieved 100% reliability for finding submerged objects. Until 1994, the Bay of Sebastopol sheltered armed dolphin sentinels year-round. If an intruder tried to penetrate the icy waters around the bay, the sentinel would sound an alarm. Then, the animal would attack.
In contact with a diver, or if struck from any direction, the mechanism would begin working. Either an alarm, which was placed here, or one here you could speak into, and an underwater pistol would go into action.
The seas around Vietnam were the first testing grounds for the U.S. Navy's attack dolphins. In 1971, the Americans used Nemo, Maui, and 3 other dolphins to spread terror through the thick waters of the Cam Ranh Bay. By the end of the war, there were rumors that 4 Viet Cong divers had been killed by the dolphins.
Between the lack of personnel, SEAL team members to defend those piers, also the presence of sharks, it was decided to take dolphins over there and attempt to see if that the project, the swimmer nullification project, could be functional. Weapon that was attached to this nose cone device in Vietnam was actually a needle mechanism that, on impact to a diver, would inject CO2 into that diver and basically blow a human being up from the inside out.
Because the dolphins couldn't always tell the difference between friends and foes, doubts about using them as killing machines began to arise.
Stories have come back from those experiences suggesting that the dolphins killed 2 of our own, 2 U.S. servicemen, 1 merchant marine fellow who fell in the water at the wrong time, and a SEAL team member who was, again, wrong place, wrong time, and the animals weren't able to tell the difference between who was who.
the Navy decided that the primary function of Dolphin Sentinels should be to spot enemy divers and simply mark their location. And the Sea Soldiers had another vital function: retrieving parts of planes, vessels, and other secret objects lost at sea. Because many such things were much deeper than the Dolphin's limit of 600 feet, new recruits were required. In the mid-70s, a pilot whale named Morgan that measured almost 20 feet long was enlisted in the Navy. Morgan had all of the echolocating abilities of the Dolphins, and he could dive to 2,000 feet and transport heavier loads. Soon, for Arctic missions, beluga whales Muktuk and Nosy joined the ranks. But bottlenose dolphins were still the Navy's favorite sea soldiers because they were the easiest to train. In 1973, a dolphin loaded with electronic equipment was sent to Cuba to observe the defense systems of Soviet warships anchored in the port of Havana. Shortly afterwards, another dolphin placed an acoustic spying apparatus on a Russian submarine in order to study its system of nuclear propulsion. But the dolphin program wasn't without challenges, because the animals are playful.
On paper, the idea of training dolphins to carry weapons and ask them to do the protection of both lives and very serious hardware like the Trident nuclear sub looks good. In the case of the dolphins, it was not unusual for them to actually come up and in a very playful nature, rather than go and hit the diver, they would turn around and hit the pontoon boat, the rubber pontoon boat, which, if it was actually a loaded weapon device, would not have a happy ending for the people in the boat.
By the Gulf War in 1990, the Navy was having doubts about the reliability of its marine mammal soldiers.
The civilian staff was asked to assist in some nighttime rehearsals to prepare the dolphins to work in the Persian Gulf for nighttime duty. During the 7 nights that we worked this detail, not one night went according to plan. The dolphins were supposed to detect us swimming from the piers. The situations often broke down because the dolphins would run off and play with the local dolphins swimming in these waters. And in one case, the only time a dolphin came anyways near accomplishing the task, a female dolphin named Slan came up close to me, but as she got close, she threw the nose cone device off of her snout, came up, put her chin on my shoulder, and I was eyeball to eyeball with this dolphin, and I whispered in my regulator, "You're supposed to be a killer." At that point, I realized that this program did not work, and I confronted the director of the program at 6 o'clock the following morning and said, "This doesn't work, does it?" And he said, "We know that."